Alrighty. So this is the third talk of mindfully centered approach. So on Clubhouse, if you can go to my bio, there's a tinyurl.com and talkmca-en direct link. If you can enter that, you will have access to a Google Drive that has all the slides. And today we're going through the third slide. Most precious emotions. And emotions are really, really precious. Unfortunately, we're taught to suppress our emotions the best we can, especially anger and fear, which are so vital for our survival and so vital for our personal growth. Um, they're hugely suppressed because of the label that we're learning. How to be a nice person and be happy, um, and be positive and stuff like that. I'm not saying we should be angry, but we should absolutely, absolutely respect our anger. So that's kind of the focus today. Um, so the first page again, the first slide, it shows the mindfully centered approach. So this is approach that I've been spending probably like 5 years, the past 5 years developing. It's all based on channels, which everybody has. All the animals have it. All the plants have it too. So these channels are electrical in nature, and in human, we can, the channel basically have four modes. Excuse me. The channels have four modes: fight and flight, rest and heal, sleep, and pause and dissociation. So this is what we talked about the first day. And I do have a recording for that if anyone missed it. And what can affect channels are our physical condition, which we talked about yesterday, emotions, and that's what we focus on today. And tomorrow we'll be talking about sympathy, empathy, compassion, which are hugely important. I think most of my patients in the clinic, with severe trauma, with PTSD or depression, anxiety, the thing that changed them the most is the change of perspective. And that makes sense, right? Because we use the same perspective to do everything that we do, to feel everything that we feel. And so, once we change that, it just changed the entire viewpoint or change our worldview, basically. And the last thing that really affect our channels is our sense of purpose and our connection to loving kindness. And this, through purpose and connect to loving kindness, overrides, in my mind, every other aspect. Okay, it doesn't matter what our emotional state is, physical state is, whatever kind of perspective that we have on life. As long as we feel I have a purpose in our heart, and we can, I can connect to loving kindness. The moment we do that, all channels go beautifully. I have witnessed this over and over again with people that have severe trauma, people that have cancers, and I haven't touched them at all. They come in the first visit. All I do is, can you lay on the table in your heart? Can you confirm, with this unwavering commitment that I have a purpose? We don't know what our purposes are. It varies all the time, but we have a purpose. It goes moment by moment. A lot of people say, "Oh, my purpose is to help people," in my life. That to me is not a purpose. That to me is a goal. Okay? A purpose just means I have a purpose anywhere I am. However, whatever condition I'm in, I don't need to be healthy. I don't need to be healed. If I'm going through cancer right now, that's exactly what my purpose is right at this moment. If I'm going through whatever kind of trauma that I have, if I'm going through, depression, that's a purpose right there. My life's purpose right now is to go through depression, is to understand how depression feels. So I have a purpose makes everything interesting, make everything curious. So instead of resisting, instead of feeling, righteous or this huge sense of injustice, we approach and we will go through life with a sense of curiosity, with a sense that what does this mean to me? And the connection to loving kindness through our third eye. So if we can all do this right now, in our heart, I have a purpose. We can whisper this or shout it out loud. It doesn't really matter. And from our third eye, which is in between our eyebrows, we connect to loving kindness. It can be God's love or Jesus' love or Buddha's compassion or the most loyal dog that we have that show us nothing but unconditional love. When we do this, our channels run beautifully. Okay, it doesn't matter how much scars we have, how much emotional trauma that we have suffered. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters when we connect to unconditional love. So that's the ultimate goal for healing. Okay, and that's the ultimate goal for mindfully centered approach for any spiritual development. Basically, to get there, it's actually very easy. We just got there, but the um, so what we're trying to do to come up with this approach and to talk about physical emotions and perspective issues is really just try to make this process that I have a purpose and I connect to loving kindness as automatic as possible. So when we feel stressed, emotional stress, we know how to handle it. So we can go back, to our sense, to this big sense or constant sense of I have a purpose and I connect to loving kindness to get our channels run as optimally as we can. So today we're going to focus on the emotional stuff. Okay. So second page or second slide. There are only two emotions that we talk about in the clinic, and that's anger and that's fear. And why? Because I believe these are the two fundamental emotions that make that kind of manifest into all kinds of other emotions like shame or sad or um, other emotions. So anger to me, I have very simple definitions. Okay, everything I do, I tend to make sure I minimize everything. Why? Because then to me it's very very useful. If I have to separate anger into three categories, and each category has three subcategories, and on, and has involves our conscious mind, our subconscious mind, and da da. To me, that's I can't handle it. I don't know how other people can, but I couldn't. And in the clinic, this to me is very, 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 very important. In the clinic, everything has to be effective. The average patient that I see are 6 sessions, and within 6 sessions, there's to me there needs to be dramatic results. If not, then that's not useful. Okay. So to me, anger equals boundary, and pure and simple. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, and fear equals alertness. So that's the simple definition of anger and fear. So anger and fear, by that very definition, and by them being the fundamental emotions, they stay with us 24/7 all the time. We cannot turn off our anger, nor can we turn off our fear. Okay, let's say if I'm driving on the highway and I'm maintaining my lane, minding my own business, having a good boundary with reasonable amount of alertness. Okay, that's anger and fear in play. The next car comes a little bit closer to my car, and automatically I will evade. I will either speed up or slow down and restore my boundary. And that's precisely what anger and fear do for us 24/7 all the time. without the brain involved. When anger and fear are guiding us like this, okay, I'm sure everybody has this experience. It's like, oh wow, then we realize, the car, we're almost hit by the car next to us, and that is zero point 0.8 seconds too late. Okay, by the time our frontal cortex, which is our thinking brain, knows what's going on, it's already about a second too late. So people who, fortunately, anger and fear are always with us. So we're always protecting our boundaries and being alert all the time. Okay. So anger has no issue. There's no problem with our anger. The problem is angry. Is anger plus a sense of ego, a sense, we take things personally. Take the previous example, when the car comes, and we get back to our, original boundary, and all of a sudden we realize we're almost hit. Then if we start to get angry, start to feel that we were minding our own business, and there's, whatever person comes along and just disrupt our boundary, and we take that personally, then we start to get angry. Okay? That is the problem. The things that break our boundary, the thing that breaks our boundary has already been taken care of. And yet we go back to that past and try to resolve that, or the things that's already happened already, not just only happened, but already resolved. So I have many PTSD patients. Okay, they come in and they all have road rage issues. They all have it. Okay. Every time they drive, they get in trouble, no matter what. Okay. Um, why? Because they allow their ego to take over. They allow their sense of, hypervigilance. They allow their sense of injustice to get attached to the person that sort of violated their boundary, and that is the problem. Okay, so anger itself, fear itself, is no issue, okay, at all. Anger has no target. Suppressed anger can be triggered by anyone, anything. And this is evident on the road, right? People getting this road rage, and that's exactly what happened. It really pointed to, you know, um, suppressed angers. Suppressed anger is just waiting for a trigger. It doesn't really matter what the trigger is. They need to come out. Okay? So anger and fear has, both have, it's basically a spectrum. So anger could go from the minus, the minus irritation to full on rage. And it's really up to us, to know how to handle this. Um, and fear is the same. To me, it goes from mindfulness to full on hypervigilant or PTSD. So anger and fear just need to be in harmony. And to me, I use the word respect. Okay, we just need to respect our anger and our fear. Our anger is like our most loyal guard dog. Anger and fear, they're our most loyal guard dogs. So when they, perk their ear up or start a long groan or something like that, all we need to do is to say, something's happening to my boundary. Let me take a look. And we look out the window and say, oh, no worry, it's Uncle Bob. And then the anger and fear automatically just subside. Why? Because the message has already been delivered, and the owner, which is us, right, the heart or the emotions are there, just there to enable motion. It's just to say, okay, there's something you need to take a look. So when we respect these messages and take a look and respond accordingly, then the anger and fear can go back to its normal state. So all this is beautiful. But through trauma, okay, or through our experiences where our angers are suppressed and fears are heightened, we learn to control, we learn to avoid triggers, and we learn to forgive, and we learn to forget. Okay. To me, none of them worked. Why? Because something was wrong. Okay, this is what we're going to talk about tomorrow, about sympathy, empathy, compassion. Okay. So with sympathy or judgment, what happened to us should not have happened. They were wrong. We were either wronged, or it's unfair for us to get what we get. Okay, the sense of injustice, and because of that, anger and fear are suppressed. And not only that, they're being hang on to it. If I was abused as a child, or if I was sexually violated as a child, um, I will hold on to it until I was 80 or 90, or until the day I die. Why? Because it was wrong. That should have never happened. I couldn't let go. I would try to forgive. I would try to forget. I would try to control all these internal angers and hatred even. And I would try to avoid triggers at all cost. But the bottom line is I still suffer because it was wrong. So the sense of right and wrong, yes, at the time when it happens, yes, it was wrong. But when I hang on to that for 70 years and I suffer through that, then I actually made a choice. So there is pain and there's suffering. Pain are almost always inevitable, out of our control. But suffering is within our control. Suffering can be a choice. And this is why we're doing this. This is exactly why we're doing this 7 talk series. So the key is really to allow our emotions to flow to the present time, to act on, to enable our emotion. So as long as emotions are acted on, acknowledged at the present time, they flow, they disappear. Okay, there are so many times, I will put the patients on the table. I will actually pinch their fingers in between the third and fourth finger, the web in between. I will pinch that. Okay, I will pinch that area, especially on the left hand, to induce a little bit of pain. When a person feels that pain and the person is okay with that pain, and the person who does the pinching has nothing but caring and kindness, and the sense of servitude. I just want to serve this person. I want to provide a nice and safe environment for this person to be in, to heal himself or herself. So I will do that pinching, and I will induce a bit of pain. So when the person feels that pain, the person is in his or her body, which is the present time. And oftentimes the patient will start, talking about what happened in the past with a lot of emotion. And so many times, people will just stop mid-track and they say, "John, it's gone. This thing is gone." The experience is still there, but the emotional content, the emotions that were suppressed, that are attached to this experience, is gone. So the goal for emotional healing in my clinic is really to turn whatever that caused suffering, or suffering trauma, or suffering past, convert that to experience plus maybe wisdom, or maybe even gratitude, or maybe even some gifts, that we can use later in our lives. Okay, the next slide. These are some of the images I grabbed off the web that kind of shows anger and fear are basically a spectrum. So I don't really talk about, or at least in the clinic, I don't really deal with anger icebergs. It's like behind, below anger, there's embarrassment, attacked, guilt, annoyed, exhausted, and disappointed, all that kind of, to me, so far they haven't been necessary in my clinic for sure. And this slide is actually in Chinese, that shows, again, the spectrum of anger and fear in Chinese. I should probably take it out, but I think it's kind of cool leaving it here too, because in Chinese there's also a whole spectrum of anger and fear terms. And I'm sure that's true in any language. All right, the symptoms of emotional issues. I've seen people who are normally very, very nice, and periodically they will, have outbursts of anger, sadness, and anxiety. Again, this is due to suppression. Depression, anxiety, panic attack. Um, Again, the sense that, you know, I have to control myself, or whatever I do has no use or is hopeless. Long term emotional issues, especially due to childhood trauma, results in fibromyalgia, autoimmune issues, just constant fatigue and pain. Their postures, are normally crouched, with crouched shoulders, and the head is forward. They often have shoulder, neck, and knee pain or tightness. They may have rigidity in limbs, dissociation to neck and sacrum areas. Um, Again, when we have emotional trauma, especially like, for example, childhood abuse or sexual attack, um, we will dissociate. Okay, this is what we talked about the first day. Is one of the channel modes is dissociation and pause. So when we are under life and death situation, we get into a mode what we call pause. In pause mode, our body is rigid. Okay, um, I've treated people who were, attacked and they were pinned down, and for example, their right elbow, just rigid all the time, for decades and decades, until we resolve the pause condition. Um, so yeah, emotional trauma has dramatic effect on the body's response. Addiction to me has a lot of suppressed emotions. It's almost like we have emotions that we don't want to touch. Okay, it's like the West Wing in the Beauty and the Beast. We shove everything in and try to lock it up as tight as we can, and nobody get close to it. And in order to do that, we need to distract ourselves so much, right? So we turn to addiction, we turn to alcohol, drugs, sex, even work, right? Even helping other people. People who are volunteers all the time, and they always want to be in that helping position, and they don't want to be helped by anybody else, right? Look deeper. There could be a huge sense of emotional suppression, PTSD, of course. Yeah. So the way we resolve emotional issues in a clinic is, first of all, sympathy free, no judgment. Okay. Um, Again, it's the sense of right and wrong, right? The righteousness or the sense of injustice that forces us to hold whatever happened to us, as tightly as we can. Even though we hate what happened, we'll hang on to it like dear life, which is very, very contradictory. For example, if I have abusive dad, and I really, really hate him, right, and I resist him, and all my life, my whole goal is not to be like him. But guess what? When I become a dad, I'm just like my dad. The person that we resisted the most, especially our parents, um, we become, almost a, exact carbon copy of that person. The best way, the way we do this, we do in the clinic, is actually to connect, from our heart of gold through loving kindness to, let's say, my dad's heart of gold, and just love him unconditionally. Okay, and this is what we will be talking about in the next few days. Okay. So the first key is sympathy free, especially sympathy towards ourselves, right? Because when we see ourselves as a victim, we have no power, and no power, no healing. And we empty the cup, right? Just like what I described, and we induce a little bit of pain, so the person is in the body, and then allow the person to go back to the past, and to hopefully allow the emotions to flow. And this is what this is why I see, talk therapies. Lots of my patients have gone through talk therapy for years, if not decades, and it wasn't really, useful. And here's the reason, right? Because when the body is not at the present time, and we go, if we go back to the past and relive the past emotions, we're actually reinforcing it rather than allow it to flow. So the key is to allow the body to be at the present time. So if we have, kids or, parents or companions, or friends, right, that who are stressed, right, who has emotional, pain that needs to be flowing, hold their hands, touch their toes or grab, certain part of their body and just allow yourself to ground, right? So as a listener, we should not sympathize with them. We should not say, yeah, right, this is just absolutely BS and it should not have happened. That is just not right. It's such injustice. It's very, very tempting to do that. The entire society teaches us to do that, right? But what we're doing is we're making both of us a victim. We're going into a deeper hole when we do this. You know, we can just be a loving, supporting listener, and just say, I am present. Let me hold your hands so you are present and tell me what's going on. Right. And just allow that person to, to express, to flow, allow that emotion to flow to the present time. And then, the person will have clarity of what needs to be done. Okay. So this way we don't accumulate things, allow emotions to flow. Okay. And then we stop filling up the cup by facing the sun. So this is what we'll be talking about tomorrow to do perspective adjustment. Okay, and the key really is to say we're not going to be a victim anymore. Okay, um, and then do everything for oneself, but never be selfish. Okay? To me, this is true self-empowerment. Basically, what this means is everything that we say yes to or say no to, we're 100% responsible for it. Okay, so no more are we like, okay, I'm doing this for my kids, or I'm doing this for my spouse, or I'm doing this for my boss. I don't really want to do this, but I have no choice because I have this responsibility. So instead, if I say, I choose to be responsible, and from this point on, whatever I feel responsible to, I'm going to do it. I choose to do it. I'm going to do it 100% for myself. Okay. Um, this has some dramatic results in the clinic. So one time I had this workshop and a lady asked me, it's like, John, what do you mean? It's like, do I apply this to everything? I said, yeah, apply this to everything. She said, well, what about when I change my kid's diaper? I said, absolutely, do it for yourself. Okay. And I asked her to try it for 1 week. Every day she changed probably like 5 pieces of diapers. It's a 35 changes. I say, if you can do this for 35 times, every time you do this, you're doing this 100% for yourself. And let me know how you feel. She called me within 3 days and she said, John, I don't hate my husband anymore. She didn't know that. She didn't know that every time she changed diaper, she was actually somewhere in her mind, it's like, why am I the only person that does this? And my husband just do this for fun or whenever he feels like it. Why is this my job? Until she changes, until she changes. Every time she changes her, her kid's diaper, she's doing it for herself. She literally, will be doing the same thing, but we'll be doing from a completely different mindset. We're not putting ourselves in a victim position. We're not building time bombs. Every time we feel like we're doing something for other people, we're literally building time bombs. Okay, and I'm sure, like, and I welcome people, listeners to share their experience to see if this is true. All right, um, the next slide shows a bell curve, and so in this society, we have bell curves everywhere. Okay, bell curves in school, bell curves when we buy cars. All the cars are designed for a certain height and certain weight and certain abilities. Okay, when we're outside of the norm, we can't find cars. We will need to have custom made cars for us. So in school, okay, school is a big thing. Okay, when we're five, we go into this mandatory kindergarten, and then for the next 12 years, basically, through high school, that's what we're gonna do, right? And all these classes, all these kids, and all these curriculums are based on some kind of a bell curve. So most people, I would say 60%, 70%, maybe even up to 80% of the people are okay within that bell curve. Well, what about the rest of the 20%, where schools are just miserable for them? They have their own purpose, they have their own sense of skills, and they have their own sense of being, but they don't fit this bell curve. So they become misfit. So most misfits in our society are being looked at as if, they just don't work hard enough, or they don't know their purpose, or they just don't know what to do. And they become as invisible as possible. Um, but some of them are really successful. There's so many global leaders, tremendously successful people. They're hugely misfit. And honestly, the 7 Day Talk are really, um, to me, aim at the misfits. Okay, the people who are who are healers. Who has trauma to heal, who have pain in their heart, who have kindness. To me, these are misfits. And a misfit, the only person that can potentially change the world are the misfits. If we all fit into this bell curve and we're very, very comfortable with this bell curve, we're not going to change it. Only the people who are outside of this bell curve can look at this bell curve, can look at how the world is going right now, and say, we can change this. Something needs to be changed. Instead of feeling injustice about it, to say this is not fair, because I don't fit this bell curve, and this is not fair for me. Instead of feeling this way, we're going to use our proper anger and really be courageous to make changes. And the first change we're going to make is ourselves. And this is essentially what the 7 Day Talk is all about. So the next slide is about heart and brain. So the brain is our ego, and the heart is our heart. Okay, the heart is always golden. So in the clinic, we have and this is how we operate. Okay, the heart is always golden. Everybody has a heart of gold. Okay. Not everybody has the best behaviors, but the behaviors are independent from our heart of gold. So let's say if I'm abused by my dad, and I feel I don't have a heart of gold, and I absolutely don't feel my dad has a heart of gold, until I look at it, until I look at him, until I start to understand him, and maybe find out that he was abused himself. Maybe he was living in a different era where the world wasn't safe or was very, very cruel. So he has a different connection, and he passed down that to me. So if we look, we start to look, we'll start to feel like, oh my goodness, everybody has a heart of gold, but everybody has a different experience. So our heart goal, our connection in the world become to change. The ideal world that we were born into is, we're born into this world with a heart of gold, and through heart of gold we can connect to loving kindness and connect to our parents' heart of gold, and they will love us unconditionally. Unfortunately, that's not the real world. The real world, we will experience something and understand love is conditional, or love is something we need to change ourselves, to seek confirmation, to suppress our feelings in order to be recognized, to be cared for, or to be valued. We start to change our connections. to other people's behaviors. But our heart is still golden. Um, so that's why we have conflict, right? So we have ego brain basically tell us like, hey, stop loving, just figure out, just be hyper vigilant, just always do risk assessment to find out what other people want from you. How can we please other people so we get the best of all situations? How can I survive better? So that's what the brain does. The brain goes, heart, stop loving, stop trusting, allow me to do all the risk calculation so we survive the best we can. But our heart has a different idea. Our heart has a different goal. Our heart has a different purpose. Our heart's purpose in life is to love unconditionally and to trust. So there's the conflict. Okay, if we don't have this heart and brain conflict, we have no suffering. We're living well. Life is good. So we feel in our heart and in our brain there's a conflict. It's like I want to do this, but it doesn't feel quite right. But this is something I have to do. Okay? Even if we have that, there's a disagreement between our heart and our brain. Okay, so the brain is always protecting. It's always selfish. That's why the term ego, and it has a reason for that. Okay, and it's beautifully designed. And it's really, really beautiful when we think about it. Ego is our best friend. Okay, ego is our life protector. Ego protects our survival, our life viciously, and we owe our life to it. The problem is when ego takes over and it says, okay, heart, you have no business in this anymore, because ego doesn't understand suffering. The heart understands suffering. Okay, so this whole thing is about trying to make ego and heart back to its own balance again. Okay, so again, ego use awareness rather than the ego always live in either the past or the future. So it keeps a list of everything we have experienced and has all this supporting evidence to say, heart, shut up. Remember this, and this. Shut up. Okay, or it projects into the future and makes us anxious. Um, and the ego's job is to protect the king, and the heart is actually the rightful king. Okay? The ego brain doesn't understand that the childhood suffering or the childhood insecurity is already past. We're okay now. The war was over 30 years ago. We don't need to be in this hypervigilant PTSD mode anymore. We don't need to feel like everybody on the street is a potential assailant anymore. Okay. So heart is, just take care of the things that brain doesn't take care of, right? So it's mindful, it's present time, it's now, it connects to a higher power, it's the rightful king. And when the heart is fully awakened, we have the tremendous sense of openness and clarity. Okay? So this whole thing is about making sure heart becomes the rightful king again. So the next slide. So now it's 6:40. I'll stop within in about 10 minutes. I actually have a lot more slides, but I'll stop in about 10 minutes. So this again shows how depression is a spectrum as well. Okay, so it goes from mildly moody to occasional moody to cyclic to constant to debilitating. Okay, that becomes very, very severe depression. Um, and the next chart goes, causes which results in certain emotions or a certain perspective, and eventually cause depression. So childhood, chaotic childhood, chronic abuse, world affairs, like the COVID-19 that's going on right now, it creates tremendous amount of worry and fear. Loss or burden, loss of a loved one, for example, burden of carrying or raising a family, misfit, which we talked about, depletion, just body exhaustion, injuries, surgeries, and traumas. So this results in worry, fear, the boundaries being broken, a sense of betrayal, insecurity, shame, anger, or pause mode and dissociation mode. So pause mode is life and death. Dissociation is basically brings. Um, so in the brain originally has every part. It has have maps of every part of our body. For example, if I roll my ankle and I'm in severe pain, the best way to remove that pain is to say, okay, I don't have that map anymore. So whatever signals that's sending from my ankle to my brain is doesn't know where it's coming from, right? So it's not registering. So all these feelings or sense or how we see the world results in nothing I do matters. And then I have no sense of purpose, no power, and depression. I'm going to skip this slide because we talk about almost everything. So I have a lot more slides talking about like depression, the channels, because everything I do is based on channels. Okay, some people are, some people ask me, it's like, John, are you doing what psychotherapists are doing? I said, no, I'm doing what channel people are doing. Okay, everything I do is based on channels, and I know depression causes channel problems. Okay. So channel wise, in depression, we have what we call the REM channel, which goes from our perineum uh, into our mouth, through the front side. This can get blocked out around the chest, or if there's a C-section, for example, right at the optimal or area. And our pericardium channel can get blocked, which causes the chest to get um, to be rigid, basically, okay, and painful. Most of my depression patients or anxiety patients, basically anybody who have emotional issues, have huge pain along the chest. So if we just poke around, you'll find it. And if it's painful, my recommendation is to do self-care every night and every morning when we awake. Okay, just care for our body over and over and over again. Um, Again, our body represent now. If we use our caring hands, right, without judgment, without going back to say that's so freaking unfair and right, just say we are here now, and I connect to loving kindness. I have a purpose. Okay? Everything that happened to me may have meanings, and then we just care for ourselves. Okay? That's really to me, that's really the best way to allow emotions to pass and to allow us to go back to the present time and be ourselves again. So when our chest is, the stuck due to pericardium channel, our most vital channel in the body, in my mind, the liver channel will have problem coming up. Okay, that results in, huge problems, huge problems. Here's this slide is a decision chart that I use. I don't really use the decision chart, but that's what's in my mind when I see a person. I don't really have a set flow, but I do take all these things into consideration: the physical, emotional, the perspective, right, and the sense of purpose and connection to loving kindness. Here I talk. There's a slide about anxiety that goes from being careful, right, to anxious due to circumstances, for example, public speaking, to a cyclic, you know, depression, anxiety, to habitual, constant, and anxiety, to panic attack and PTSD. Again, it is a spectrum, and yeah, my intention is to provide enough material, and really my firsthand experience. Okay, I don't really feel like what I'm sharing is knowledge or something that we can Google or something we can read from a book. It's really my firsthand experience, and I really hope that my firsthand experience will resonate with you. So you can you can go through what you're going through and become a lighthouse for yourself and for the people around you. There's there's gifts for depression and anxiety. The gifts for of anxiety to me are perfectionist. They want to make sure that everything they do is correct. That's why they're anxious in the first place. They're predicting what's going to happen in the future. Okay? They tend to be picture thinkers, movie makers. They're very, very imaginative because that's what's needed to predict the future. Right? They're normally task driven, meaning that they have a checklist of what's going to happen and what needs to be done, and when it's done, it's checked off. And they apply the same thinking to spiritual development, like meditation, for example. So many people come to my clinic and say, John, I know my channel is not going to run well today because I did not meditate this morning. I said, well, you should stop meditation because you're looking at the wrong way. You're looking at meditation as if you're taking a pill. Right? If you're not taking that pill, you're not going to feel good today. That is not that's not what we want. Okay? People with anxiety normally they just have extremely well developed brain power, very, very highly intelligent. Right? Um, they can calculate things. Their processing speed are just superior. I mean, just super. Right? They tend to be a really, really good planners of the future and prepare things extremely well. They're attentive and detailed. Okay? So a lot of the police officers, they fit this profile. I actually went to a local police and community, called a, kind of a function, a 6 weeks or 7 week training. And the police chief actually was there, and he said, one of the criteria for hiring police officers is they are borderline OCD, right? Because otherwise they won't be able to do their jobs. If we're too lax, too relaxed, you're not going to find enough evidence to support any case, right? So the police officers actually need to be borderline OCD, which has absolutely has a huge component of anxiety in there. And again, this whole chart, the next slide, shows how my interpretation or my um, experience of how anxiety is formed. Um, so the bottom line is we face the sun. So one more channel slide that shows the anxiety channels representation. I'm not going to go through that detail. And here's another flow chart. I'm not going to go through that either. It's 6:50, and I really want to open things up so I can get feedbacks and sharing, so we can potentially go deeper even. It's actually not easy for me to talk about this because what I talk about are really principles, right? And principles are useless unless they get applied. So if you can share your experience, how you feel, or and stuff like that, then we can see if these principles can be applied. So what I really do with my when I develop this mindfully centered approach is really I use it, I test it, and I reflect on it, and I continue to refine it. Okay, so what I'm presenting today is really the very current versions of what I feel is working in my clinic. Okay, with this, I'm gonna stop speaking. Um, and if you have anything to share or to any question, I'd appreciate you share with everybody. No question? So the Zoom side, you can also use the chat window to come up with questions as well, or sharing. Okay, if there's no question, let me go through the anxiety channel because it's actually very interesting. Okay, so I'm looking at, let me see which page it is. Um, okay, it's page 19 in the slide. No, actually 18, page 18 in the slide. So it says typical anxiety channels. Okay. So on the very left-hand side, it's what we call the DO channel that runs through, from basically our perineum, uh, basically along the spine. During the daytime, it actually enters um, at the occiput, which is the head meets the neck, the area. It actually goes into our brain, energize our midbrain, and come out of yin tang, which is in between our eyebrow or the third eye. Okay, so this is how the DO channel flows during the day. And when we're asleep or when we're sleeping, actually go through the top of our head, which doesn't energize our midbrain, because if it does, then we'll have trouble falling asleep. Um, and the exercise that we just did, right? Pulling up our perineum a little bit. I have a purpose in my heart, and through the third eye, I connect to loving kindness. Essentially, energize or activates the DO channel. Okay, so when this channel goes well, we have a sense that I belong. I have a purpose. I may be the smallest blade of grass among giant sequoia trees, but I have a purpose. I belong here. I have every right to thrive just like any other trees or any other vegetations or any other beings in the world. And that's really the key for us, right? Human is the only um, race, I guess, that will actually doubt our own sense of being. Why am I here? I'm useless here. Okay, I feel small here. Everybody does better than me. Why is my shorter? Why am I shorter? Why am I taller? Right? We constantly compare ourselves against other people. Right? The key really is to say, I have a purpose. So whatever I have, whatever things I'm going through, whatever families do I have, I may have the best family, the most loving family in the world, or I may have the worst. But I'm not gonna. Can I not compare against, compare mine against others? So when we feel I have a purpose, in this unwavering sense from our heart, we belong. We belong anywhere we happen to be. We may be there to make a fool out of ourselves, right? To get educated, or to share something that's valuable. We don't know. We just don't know. Okay. So I have a purpose. Really, is to me is this is how we can live in the moment, live in the now. And when we do this and we connect to loving kindness, our DO channel, which is to me is one of the most vital channels in the whole system, flows beautifully. This allows us to connect from our root, which is the perineum, all the way to the heaven, which is loving kindness. And not only that, we have our heart committed and confirmed that I have a purpose. So it means within this heaven and earth, I am valuable. I am a key piece for my own existence. I don't need any confirmation. I don't need to please anybody. My job is to live my potential to the fullest. And when we do that, we honestly we're not very anxious. Okay. When we're anxious, this channel doesn't flow like this. This channel basically breaks. It doesn't really go into our midbrain. So when our midbrain doesn't have enough energy, it takes energy from the side brains. Okay, so our left and right side. So the second channel is the gallbladder channel. So the gallbladder channel goes from a temporal, which is the side of our head, which energizes our side brains, all the way flow all the way down to our toes, okay, to our little toe actually. So when our two channel are not flowing and our midbrain doesn't have enough energy, our side brains are taking over. Our side brains are super good. Okay, our midbrain is super good at having clarity, having a sense of calmness, and when the midbrain is energized, our immune system, our hormonal system, all our systems are just running much better. But when the midbrain doesn't have enough energy because we feel small, or we feel suppressed, or we feel like nothing I do matters, or I feel the world is so unjust. Okay, the two channel doesn't run very well. Our midbrain doesn't have enough energy. We don't have clarity. We have chatters coming from the left and right brain. So our gallbladder channel, which is supposed to run, normally from our side brain, our temporal area, all the way down to our little toes, they get stuck in our head. So they do constant calculation, constant risk assessment, constant hypervigilance. Okay, constantly just trying to predict what's going to happen to us in the future. And that is anxiety. Anxiety to me is something that we feel is going to come up and we don't know when and we don't know where. It has a lot of fear factor in there. And our side brains, our left and right brain are trying to resolve this. They're trying to predict the future as accurately as it can. I met people who are so anxious. Everything they do, it's like, okay, they're going to the dentist or they're going to the donut shop to buy donuts. They will literally construct, you know, movies or sequences of events that they predict what's going to happen when they go into the donut shop and get donuts. Some of them will actually have like 12 movies per event. And if the 12 movies are not aligned or not met, the 12 movies, none of them matches the actual reality, they actually get very frustrated, and they will actually refine this movie production to go even further, to take more variables into account. And we can imagine when people use the same thinking process or the same process um, to build their relationships. Okay, for example, just loving relationships. Okay, romantic relationships. Then they're gonna have so many troubles, so much trouble. Right? This is really good. I mean, this kind of a thinking process is really good for building, let's say, a computer game, or designing the next rocket to the moon, right? But where every variable they can conceive can potentially fit into this movie, but relationship, very difficult. Okay, and I've seen a lot of frustration from my patients because they're trying to use the same method, and most of them are extremely successful. They're professionals, they're investors, they're people in just planning, right, and thinking and formulating, imagining, very good at that. But when it comes to relationship, that they're using the same methodology and they fail miserable. Okay, and they get so anxious and their anxiety couldn't, because they need to solve it. When they couldn't solve it, the left and right brain actually requires even more energy and consume their entire life. They couldn't sleep. They eating has a problem, and they're just like zombies. So these are the two big channels, and the liver channel, when the gallbladder channel doesn't go down properly, the liver channel has problem coming up, and it affects the kidney channel and the pericardium channel as well. So in the clinic, that's what we do. Okay, I look at these and we restore them. And some of them are due to anxiety, are due to emotional issues. Quite a few are actually due to physical issues. Okay, so physically, the gallbladder channel can get blocked as well. Animal attack, for example, a bite along the side of the calf, for example, can impede the free flowing of gallbladder channels, which cause more energy in the brain, which cause more hypervigilance, more anxiety that way as well. So in the clinic, I do look at not just emotional side, but also physical side as well. Okay. And again, I welcome comments or questions or feedbacks. Okay. Um, Normally I get a lot of questions and feedbacks, but okay. So if there's no, and stop me anytime, okay? This is really, to me, this is really the time I look for feedbacks, and so we can go further. But if not, let me go back to one more slide. Let me talk about, okay, emotional issues. So emotions, let me talk one of the technique that I use in the clinic. It's called act out. Okay, so this is I'm on slide maybe like 19 or something like that. No, 20. So this is on slide 20. So in the decision diagram or the decision flowchart, when a person comes in, we look at it and say, well, how's the channels? If the channel is not good, then we look for physical, emotional perspective or purpose, potential issues. And let's say if it's emotional, and we discover there's tremendous amount of suppressed emotions. For example, a person was sexually assaulted multiple times, and there's definitely emotions suppressed. There's also something that needs to get acted out. Okay, and here's how it works in the clinic. This is how we do this. Okay, so we have three brains. We have the reptilian brain, we have the limbic brain, which are reptilian brains are reflex brain. The limbic brain, which is our emotional brain, and the frontal cortex, which is our thinking brain. So the reptilian brain is responsible for us to act immediately without thinking. So if we have, for example, if a bee flies too close to us and we hear the buzz, we automatically do something. I mean, there's no time to think like what's going on here. So we have a lot of automatic responses. Okay, and those are the reptilian brain is responsible for that, for a reflex. When things happen, we just do it. Okay, if there's something that gets too close to our eyes, our head moves right away because we need to. Right? um, so let's say during a sexual assault, okay, a person was pinned down, there's violence, there's suppression, um, there's a resistance, but eventually, because when we're attacked, okay, when our boundary is severely impacted, the reptilian brain was actually issuing commands after commands after commands to get us to survive the best we can. But when we are restrained, let's say my hand was pinned down, my whole body was pinned down, and the reptilian brain goes, okay, just poke this guy's eyes out. I couldn't. Okay. You may issue other commands which I could not execute. So what we do in the clinic, and there's again, this is just firsthand experience, and this is what we do, is to say, to assume, okay, and I can't prove this, but this is what I see in the clinic, is the unfinished reptilian brain commands are always pending. They just remain pending. Okay, they don't go away. Reptilian brain's commands needs to get finished. They need to get act out. Okay, so this is why there's a term act out in this chart, and I highlight it in red. So what we do in the clinic is to say, okay, um, let's say I was sexually assaulted. So what I would do, if I'm willing and I'm ready, and those are the two keywords. I cannot fake this. Okay, I have to be willing. I have to be ready to truly face this event and truly resolve it. So when I'm ready and I'm willing, I will actually connect. I will have a sense of purpose in my heart. I have a heart of gold. I will connect to loving kindness. And through loving kindness, I will connect to the heart of gold of my assailants. Okay, could be my dad, could be somebody else I know, could be a total stranger, could be three neighbors. And they all have heart of gold, but they have terrible, terrible behaviors that cause me a tremendous amount of pain and cause my body and cause my reptilian brains to issue all these commands to fight back. Okay. So once I have this connection of heart to loving kindness to heart connection, then I can act out. So in the clinic, I've seen this many, many times. I will actually remove all the obstacles. I actually have lights and lamps and heat lamps and stuff like that around the table. I will move them as far away from the table as possible, and basically get the person to start pushing, and then eventually punching, and eventually screaming and kicking and shouting out loud and ta-da and maybe crying, for as long as they need. Actually, I have quite a few rape patients, people who were raped multiple times, that went through this and got tremendous amount of relief. I have one patient. She was actually one of my students. I didn't witness this, but she was raped by three people in her life. I think one maybe when she was 16, and then 18, and maybe 20 or something like that. And all her life she was anxious. When she was ready to take a test, and she would just vomit and have tremendous headache and just go through the whole, just whole severe, severe anxiety. So she took my class and I discussed this and I mentioned this act out. Okay. And she tried that night. She acted out that night with all the, all the connections and all the acting out. And she came back the next class and she expressed this to the entire class, and she said she's fine now. The build all the reptilian brain commands that she suffered, she has to suppress, is gone. Okay. So essentially, trauma needs to get processed properly. I guess that's really the key. Okay. I cannot say I understand everything or every aspect about trauma, but these are the first-hand experience that I share. Okay, 7:11, 11 past 7. Any question, comments, anything that resonate with you?
Hello, John. I just posted a question.
Okay, let me look at the chat.
Yeah. My question is, does aggressiveness also mean having a poor boundary?
Yes. Okay, so the question is aggressiveness, does it also does aggressiveness also mean having a poor boundary? Okay, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for this question. I think you're more leading leading me to talk than asking a question. Thank you very much. So being aggressiveness is another form of boundary protection. So when we have a poor boundary, There are essentially um, two extreme representations. One is super nice, just no boundary. You can come into my town. You can walk into my house however you want, anytime you want. I'm not gonna resist you because I long for the longest time I've learned that resistance has no meaning. So I have buried my anger or my sense of protection of my boundary to the bone. So that's one representation. On the other side is aggressiveness. It's like I know my boundary is broken. My house has no front door. So what I do is in my yard, I have all these barbed wires and I have all these arrows ready to shoot. And anybody who comes even a bit closer to my boundary, I'm going to yell, I'm going to shout, I'm going to make myself as big as I possibly can to scare that person away. So to me, yes. Okay. Um, and again, thanks, Phoning, for this question because when I was going through Chinese medicine school, when I was an intern in the school clinic, I actually asked the front desk, the receptionist, to assign me the most angry patients possible. Um, because when I see people with anger, what I really see is a heart that's golden, but with a very, very broken boundary and poor connection. Um, so it's very interesting. And once I see people that way, nobody's angry at me. Um, because I really don't take things personally. Because when we see that people have heart of gold, and the people who are most angry are the people who have true trauma and boundary issues, um, we understand, and when we have no sympathy, right, we don't pity that person, we don't feel that person is a victim, right? We find ways um, to respect that person, to support that person, to heal. Okay? To me, that's really the essence of our clinic, is to do that. Yeah. Again, thanks for that question. Okay, we've got about 15 more minutes to go. Any more questions? Or if not, I'm going to talk about app removal. Okay, let me talk about it for about 5 minutes. Okay. So we install apps in our brain um, to make things more automatic. Okay. Um, so maybe phoning, but phoning, if you explain this, the clubhouse side wouldn't be able to hear it. Um, do you mind if I share your app story, phoning?
Which one?
The sleeping app.
Yes. Sure. I'm not quite sure which one, but yeah, I think it should be okay.
Okay, the baby sleeping thing.
Oh, that one. Sure. Feel
That
free.
one's fine. That one's fine. Okay, all right. So,
Oh,
so
that one's fine. It seems like I have a lot. No, I think that's
mhm.
the only one.
Yeah, I only share the ones that are shareable. Yes. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So Fengling shared an app with me the other day. Okay. She said when her son was born, he was having trouble. Well, not having trouble. He was hard. He was not sleeping too well and things like that. And being a first child, being a first time mom, she's probably more anxious. Uh, so she was basically deprived of sleep, right? And she has to get up every few hours, and when she gets up, she couldn't go back to sleep, and just she feels very, very. Um, she doesn't feel very well, And finally, she basically installed an app in her brain and said, I don't need to sleep that much anymore, or something like that, something along that line. Or at night, I don't need to I don't need to sleep. And once she installed that app, she felt differently right off the bat. I wish she's on Clubhouse. Maybe you can jump into Clubhouse phone and speak from here, and so we can record you on Zoom. I think when you tell this story, it's so much better. Yeah. But anyway, and this app is basically how we change our perspective, and we change our system, and we change our channels to fit whatever that's going on, whatever we're facing at that time. But the issue is, if that app, which is I don't need to sleep at night, right, continue to run, 10, 20 years, 30, 40, 50 years after, then her health wouldn't be good, right? Fortunately, that app was gradually removed for some reason all by itself, right? So we may all have this app. It's like we get to schools, we're bullied, or our parents are abusive and stuff like that. So one day we stand in front of the bathroom mirror and look at ourselves in the eyes and say, I'm not gonna feel that pain anymore. For example, and boom, we don't feel that pain anymore. But then we couldn't feel joy either. So a lot of times, in the clinic, that's what we unwrap and discover. It's like peeling off layers and layers of onions, and discover that there are apps, that was installed long time ago due to certain circumstances, which are not valid anymore. Okay. So what we do is we remove these apps that don't serve us anymore. Okay. And the way we remove it is, again, I have a purpose from our heart, connection to loving kindness, and just really feel that sense of peace and continue to connect until eventually we feel joy. And that's when the heart is fully, fully alive. And the heart can go into the brain and find that little app that don't serve us anymore and just zaps it. Okay, just remove a few brain cells, if you will. Or in its place, install a new app, a different app that will serve us at this point. And some people use this technique to basically, we can do like, okay, um, I'm not gonna sleep during meditation, or something, very simple like that, and boom, they don't fall asleep during meditation. um, um, so it's very interesting. Okay. And I've seen apps like, if I look stressed, if I look busy, um, my mom will not hit me. Okay. I literally have one, anxiety patient, and her app was installed because when she was very young, her parents are very, very demanding physically and emotionally. Her mom is a horse rider, a painter, and so I mean, she always have to do something. Okay, her dad is similar. Okay, she has to either play basketball or feeding the dogs or cats, or play in the yard or something like that. If she just put herself down on the sofa, she get whacked. Okay, so her app was, if I'm stressed, then I'm okay. Then nobody's gonna bother me. So all her life she needs to be stressed. You know, her panic attack came, will come in when she is, either stuck in traffic or in an open highway that has absolutely no cars in the front. So when she's doing nothing, her sense of stress just elevates to no end. That's when she has panic attacks. And why? Because she has an app. Like, okay, if I don't do anything, or if I look relaxed, or if I'm not busy, or if I'm not stressed, then I'm not okay. So in the clinic, again, we use that simple technique, connect our heart to loving kindness and truly activate our heart. First we'll feel peace, eventually we'll feel a sense of joy. And then once the heart is fully activated, we can go into the brain and remove that, locate the area that, with the app that don't serve us anymore, and just replace it or zaps it, just kill a few brain cells. We have billions and billions of brain cells. It's okay to kill a few that has these out of date apps, like in our phones, right? All right. Oh, phone is, yeah. Phone, you want to retell that story in Clubhouse?
I think you've been telling a good story.
Yeah.
The app that I found actually it's because I think 2 days ago when I asked you about the dissociation, can it be resolved by itself? Because that reminds me that when I have that condition that I don't need to sleep that much, and I think that's a kind of dissociation from my spirit to my body, that my body no longer feel tired and no pain because the muscle aching, and I don't really feel tired and no need to sleep as much, and which is very different from who I am since I was little. So I was thinking about the dissociation. Then after that, we discussed about it, and you told me that it's more like a fight and flight mode, and that command actually building become an app building in my head, and I was in that mode that I was just acting according to the app, and that was really uh, exceptional experience for me because to me I'm the kind that I have to sleep a lot, but by that time I can just no sleep up the whole night, and when my son was sleeping I can just go to sleep in with him right away, and even it's only half an hour I feel refreshed after I woke up. So it was really, I don't feel that's me and feel kind of robotic. But since after my son got older, I gradually got back my old sleeping pattern that I need more sleep and I can sense more. So now I don't have that problem, or I don't have that kind of condition anymore. So I was curious, has that app removed by itself? It seems so. So that's why I have that question the other day. Yeah, that's basically my story.
Yeah. It seems like the app was removed. Yes.
And it's automatically removed. That's why I feel curious. So maybe for many people, app could be removed uh, automatically or at certain time without knowing. But if we don't have any feeling of, or pain or uncomfortable feelings, then we may not ever discover the app or the dissociation that we may have, right?
Yeah.
Is it possible?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I think your app was installed to solve a problem, right? So it's not something
Right.
that you were forced to. It's just that something you were experiencing, and you literally make a choice to say, okay, in order to do what I do, to be a mom, right, and not and this is what you need to do. So I think there's a component of choice, which is your free will, right? Um,
Yeah, that's true. But that didn't work for my second child anymore.
um, yeah, could be. But the patients I see, the patient with anxiety that have these apps, those apps were basically forced upon them. There's a huge emotional resistance to it, um, and there's a huge sense of injustice to it. So I think that might be a difference. It's actually an interesting question. Yeah. Yeah, we'll continue to observe. Okay. We'll continue to
Yeah,
refine what we know.
exactly. And actually, that day you also mentioned that actually it could be a combination of different modes. So that actually add one more layer of complexity, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we try to not go into complexity, right? So the goal is actually to face the sun, right? I mean, we can have many different apps and they're active or inactive. It's like in the phone, right? In the phone, we have a lot of apps that we have absolutely no idea why they're there, right? Um, and if they don't act up or if they don't consume too much of our power or the space or whatever, right? They don't impede us very much, then we don't then it's probably doesn't really affect us, right? Um, but I think really the key is, can we face the sun? Right? Can we align ourselves, have a sense of purpose and connect to loving kindness? I think if we do, all the apps that are that don't serve us anymore will continue to surface, and we can continue to remove them and replace them with the ones that's serving us.
Yes, makes that sense.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. The technology actually start to match, a lot of the healing things, right? Like, yeah, like apps. Oh, I actually have a Glendy. Please share.
Um, okay.
So, Glendy, you have a lot of reflection for some reason.
How about if I speak on the Zoom directly? Because
Yeah.
I was
Perhaps we
talking
need to
to.
mute the Zoom side so the sound
So,
won't be
so
repeated.
Glendy, try speak on Clubhouse and mute your Zoom side and see how that works.
Okay.
That's what I do. And now?
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, just from the comments sharing, I just have a thought because it's her free will to have these apps in her mind when she need it, like a robotic person. But in the reality, if you are actually doing the work and doing the job, it is, I mean, very efficiently in a certain way. You need less sleep, but your performance is very high. So that made me think, is it possible if I can actually control a balance in between, which means, we have our personal life as well as professional life. Could we have these apps like optional when I'm at work? I can have maybe I don't need 8 hours sleep, I only need 5 hours sleep. And I can have my performance pretty good. But at the same time, my physical body and also like emotional side, because after learning the lesson from John, maybe I can do both in a balanced way. Would that be a better? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think so. And it does require mastery of these things. Um, so the book Tracking the Dragon, my teacher Janice Hadlock book, she may have an example in that book or maybe in one of her other book about one of her patients. And he was able to do this. He was able to use dissociation. He was able to use different channel modes to maximize his time or to maximize his performances. So yes, people do that, and to do that without side effects, or to do this very, very efficiently at the appropriate time actually does require mastery. And apps tend to be longer term things, in my mind. So a lot of people going to work, they just, switch to a fight and flight mode, channel mode, which is absolutely necessary in my mind. I feel like the whole high tech industry, is a huge. I mean, they basically hire people who are in fight and flight, because people who are in fight and flight, they don't need management. They will work based on their own internal drive. They don't need people to say, okay, keep up the schedule, because they will keep up the schedules themselves because they're in fight and flight mode. They want to get things done. They want to get things done as precisely and perfectly as possible, right? Um, so so some of the patients I see they basically get stuck in fight and flight, and they cannot go back to what we call the rest and heal. Um, so Glendy, you're absolutely right. We can go into work with a fight and flight, more on the fight and flight mode, and be more efficient. But I really feel like long term, that's not a good solution. A better solution is for us to be, somewhat in between fight and flight and rest and heal. So we're not going to the extreme side of fight and flight to have efficiency and productivity, but somewhere in between where we have flow. Okay. If you watch tennis, you can see like Roger Federer plays are very, very different than Rafael Nadal. Okay. And Rafael Nadal to me are, use pure fight and flight. Okay? It's all muscle, it's all speed, it's all power. But if you look at Roger Federer play, he has flow, and he's just as good, just as efficient, and he has less injuries, far less injuries than any, these top-notch tennis players. Why? Because he find a way to flow. So he's far more parasympathetic. He's far more in the rest and heal mode than in the fight and flight mode. Um, and Yeah, hopefully, yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because that's really a good question. It's like, how do we maximize our life, basically, right? How can we live, as smoothly as we can and still maintain full productivity? Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks.
Thank you. When you talk about Roger, when he's in the flow, do you mean he's like body? How should I say? The physical body and combined with his action, like a reflection, has joined like perfectly. That's why he won't get much injury, as well as he can have the perform
Yeah.
like pretty high. In another word, means if I want to go into that perfect way, I need to practice like many times, so I can. It's like install these balance apps inside my body, and I know when to switch in between swing. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I really feel it's deeper than that. I feel like he has a different perspective. He has a different emotional response for everything he does. He doesn't need to put himself in a fight and flight where emotions are basically just aggressions. He has a different. I mean, if you watch enough of him playing and watch enough of Nadal playing, you will see the difference. Their emotional um, responses to to everything on the tennis courts are different. Their emotional responses outside of the tennis court are probably different, which I have no knowledge, but I would imagine so. So I think it's a complete person. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. So tomorrow we'll be talking about sympathy, empathy, and compassion, because to me that's another component for us to see the world. And yeah, hopefully that will shine more light on having a flow. Yeah. So I have a Zoom question. If someone is naturally a fight or flight mode, what can he or she do to adjust physically or emotionally? Is it a matter of intention? Okay. Fight and flight mode involves a target. Okay. It's fight and flight mode. Essentially, there is a threat, and the threat can be real or it can be imaginary. So, for example, PTSD, right? So I have patients or veterans, military, Marine people, have loads of guns and, all the windows and doors are still barred and have multiple security system and they couldn't sleep at night. They are still in the fight and flight mode as if somebody's going to break down the door or enter through the roof at any time. Okay. So to me, safety or the sense of being, of safe is not just physical. The emotional side or the mental side plays a huge role. So if a person is naturally in constant fight and flight, to me, fight and flight is not a natural state. So if the person is constantly in fight and flight, there's something that's bothering that person. There's a constant sense of not being safe, that people are out there to get me, or in general, just life is not fair. Okay, so there's a constant calculation. There's a constant sense that the people who walk around me may be there to hurt me or something like that. Okay, so really, it is a matter of intention. It's a matter of our worldview. So tomorrow, sympathy, empathy, compassion, that's the thing that we'll be talking about. And we'll be talking about how we can restore our sense of safety by restoring our connection to loving kindness. That will be tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. I hope that sort of answered the question at the, yeah, thank you. Okay, 7:40. And thanks for being here, and I hope some of this resonate with you, and we'll continue to share tomorrow. So things will start to get simpler and simpler. Okay, there's a lot of information today, a lot of information yesterday. Tomorrow we're just going to be talking about sympathy, empathy, compassion, and that's it. And the day after that, we're just going to continue to get simpler and simpler. Okay, at the very last day is just nothing but being a lighthouse, nothing but being a loving kindness lighthouse, and that's it. Okay, because at the end, at some point, things need to work. Okay, I don't. It's one thing explaining things. It's another thing to make things work. Okay, what I like to share is not knowledge, but something that we can truly act upon and truly use that to change our lives. So we have the potential to affect other people, to change their lives. We can't change other people's lives, but the only thing we can do is to say, I am changing, and because I've changed, I have this internal light that other people can see, and other people can sort of follow and change themselves. Okay, so that's the only thing we can do. So the concept of being a lighthouse will be explained in the following in the days to follow, and that will be basically the end. At the end is I am a loving kindness lighthouse. That one phrase just tie everything back together. All right, cool. I'm gonna sign off.